What if a single act of kindness could not only heal the brokenness of a child, but also turn the tide for a community on the brink of losing everything? Dawn's Haven Diner stood at the frayed edge of Ashwood Hollow, a town where time seemed to limp along, and dreams often crumbled into the cracked asphalt of Cedar Street. The diner's worn leather booths, chipped Formica counters, and a jukebox stuck on an old Johnny Cash tune whisper brighter days. But for Leora Vance, 29, it was a heartbeat of her world. Her auburn hair was perpetually tied in a loose braid, strands escaping to frame her tired but warm amber eyes, which held a quiet resilience forged in hardship. Born and raised in Ashwood Hollow, Leora had learned early how to stretch a dime, smile through exhaustion, and carry grief without letting it break her. Her mother, Eloan, had worked double shifts at the diner to keep them afloat, but leukemia had claimed her 3 years ago, leaving Leora with a mountain of medical debt and a promise to make a difference, no matter how small. Her dream of earning a counseling degree to help kids like she once was felt like a distant star, fading with each late-night shift. Leora moved to the diner with the grace of someone who knew every creak in the linoleum. She refilled coffee for Torrin, the trucker who always tipped an extra dollar despite his own lean wallet, and slipped an extra slice of bacon onto Old Man Thane's plate when he grumbled about his pension. It was a slow Wednesday afternoon, the clock inching toward 5 p.m., when the bell above the door let out a sharp jingle, slicing through the diner's hum. A man strode in, his charcoal suit stark against the diner's faded backdrop. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair flecked with silver and a jawline that spoke of power earned through ruthlessness. Behind him trailed a little girl, her chestnut hair tangled, her emerald coat too tight across her shoulders, her pale face etched with sorrow that made Leora's breath catch. The girl's hands trembled as she clutched a worn sketchbook, her green eyes fixed on the floor, as if willing herself invisible. The man slid into a booth, his phone already in hand, fingers flying across the screen. The girl sat opposite, her sketchbook pressed against her chest like armor. Leora grabbed 2 menus and approached, her sneakers squeaking softly. "Evening," she said, her voice warm but cautious, sensing the tension radiating from the pair. "Welcome to Dawn's Haven. Coffee to start?" "Black. No cream," the man said, without looking up, his tone clipped, as if he were used to commanding boardrooms and expecting instant obedience. Leora nodded, then turned to the girl. "And you, sweetheart? We got hot chocolate with extra marshmallows if you're feeling cozy." The girl didn't respond. Her green eyes darted briefly to Leora, then back to the table. Up close, Leora saw the shadows under her eyes, the way her lips pressed into a thin line, as if holding back a scream. Something twisted in Leora's chest, a memory of her own childhood, sitting alone in the diner while Eloan worked late, the world feeling too big and too heavy. "I'll give you a minute with the menus," Leora said, setting them down. She lingered, hoping for a sign from the girl, but none came. As she walked back to the counter, she felt the weight of the girl's silence, urgent and haunting, like a cry only she could hear. Leora poured the man's coffee, stealing glances at the booth. The girl hadn't touched the menu, her hand still clutching her sketchbook. The man, Declan Warwick, she'd later learn, was deep in a call, his voice low but sharp. "Finalize the acquisition. I don't care about the optics. Get it done." He belonged to a world of glass skyscrapers and private jets, not Ashwood Hollow's dusty streets, where the biggest news was the annual Harvest Festival. Leora crouched beside the girl's side of the booth, keeping her voice soft. "Hey, you hungry? We got something special today. Mr. Starbread. He's a pancake with a big, goofy smile made of syrup and whipped cream. Want to meet him?" The girl's eyes flicked up, wary but curious. For a moment, Leora thought she saw a spark, but the girl looked down again, silent. Leora pressed on, her tone light but persistent. "I'll let you in on a secret. Mr. Starbread only shows up for really special kids. And I'm betting you're one of them." The girl's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. Declan glanced up, his brow furrowing. "She won't eat," he said, his voice flat, like he'd given up hope. "Don't bother." Leora ignored him. In the kitchen, she whipped up a pancake, shaping the syrup into a lopsided grin with whipped cream eyes, a blueberry nose, and a sprinkle crown for extra flair. She set it in front of the girl with a flourish. "Here's Mr. Starbread. He says he's thrilled to meet you." The girl, Isadora, Leora would later learn, stared at the pancake, her expression unreadable. Declan's phone buzzed, but he didn't reach for it. His eyes locked on his daughter. Leora slid into the booth opposite Isadora, picking up a fork. "You know, Mr. Starbread gets kind of sad if no one tries him. Mind if I take a bite first?" Isadora watched as Leora cut a small piece and ate it, exaggerating as satisfied in a mem. "He's extra happy today. "Want to try?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Isadora reached for the fork. Her hand shook as she cut a tiny piece and brought it to her lips. She hesitated, then took a bite. Leora's heart leaped, but she kept her face calm. Isadora took another bite, then another, her movements growing steadier, her eyes softening as if a weight had lifted, if only for a moment. Declan's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table. He stared at Isadora, his face a mix of shock and something raw. Hope, perhaps, or the ghost of a man he'd forgotten how to be. "Isadora," he whispered, almost to himself. Leora stood, brushing her hands on her apron. "I'll check on you in a bit," she said, giving Isadora a wink. As she walked away, she felt Declan's eyes on her, intense and searching, like he was seeing her for the first time. The next day, the diner was busier, the lunch crowd filling the booths with chatter and the clink of silverware. Leora was balancing a tray of plates when the bell jingled, and Declan stormed in, his face a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, desperation. His suit was slightly rumpled, a crack in his polished armor. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp, drawing stares from Torin and Thane. "What did you say to her?" Leora set down the tray, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm sorry, what?" "Isadora," he said, his voice breaking. "She ate yesterday. For the first time in weeks. She even smiled. She asked for pancakes this morning." "What did you do?" Leora's heart softened at the name. "Isadora, just pancakes and a little kindness," she said, meeting his gaze. She seemed like she needed someone to see her. Declan's jaw tightened, as if her answer were too simple to trust. "She hasn't eaten since—" He stopped, his eyes glistening. "Since her mother died. 7 months ago. Car accident. Therapists, doctors, nannies, none of them could get through to her. And you, a waitress." The word stung, but Leora let it slide. She'd heard worse in her life. "Sometimes it's not about fixing someone," she said quietly. "It's about showing up for them." Before Declan could respond, the bell jingled again, and Isadora ran in, her backpack bouncing. She threw her arms around Leora's waist, her face lit with a smile that transformed her entire being. "Leora," she said, her voice soft but bright, "can we have Mr. Starbread again? With extra sprinkles?" The diner went silent, every head turning. Leora's throat tightened, but she ruffled Isadora's hair. "You got it, kiddo." She led Isadora to a booth, ignoring the lump in her chest. Declan followed, his phone untouched, his eyes fixed on his daughter, as if afraid she'd vanish if he looked away. Over the next few months, Isadora became a fixture at Dawn's Haven. She'd show up after school, her backpack stuffed with sketchbooks and crayons, her once tangled hair now neatly braided by Leora, during slow moments. Leora would sit with her, drawing silly pictures of pancakes with superhero capes or telling stories about the diner's secret recipe for happiness. A pinch of laughter, a dash of kindness, and a whole lot of heart. Isadora's laughter, once a rare sound, began to ripple through the diner, warming the hearts of the staff and regulars. Torin slipped her extra sugar packets to sweeten her drawings, and Thane taught her how to fold napkins into cranes, his gnarled hands patient as she fumbled. Declan, too, became a regular, though his presence was a study in contrasts. At first, he'd sit in a corner booth, his laptop open, his world of corporate deals clashing with the diner's simplicity. But gradually he softened. He'd ask Isadora about her drawings, nodding seriously as she explained her latest masterpiece, a pancake soaring over Ashwood Hollow with a rainbow trail. One day, when the diner was slammed, he cleared a table, his suit jacket draped over a chair, earning a surprised grin from Leora and a raised eyebrow from Jackson, the cook. Leora saw the cracks in Declan's polished exterior. She overheard his tense phone calls about hostile takeovers and boardroom politics, caught the exhaustion in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Through snippets of conversation, she learned he was Declan Warwick, CEO of Ward Technologies, a tech conglomerate worth billions. His wife, Serafina, had been his anchor, the one who kept him grounded, who made him laugh, who reminded him there was more to life than profit margins. Her death had shattered him, leaving him to raise Isadora alone while juggling a company that demanded his soul. But another shadow loomed over Dawn's Haven. The diner was drowning in debt. The landlord, Gideon Holt, a slick real estate developer with a knack for turning small-town charm into strip malls, had raised the rent, and bills were piling up faster than tips could cover. Jackson confided that if things didn't turn around, Dawn's Haven might close by summer. Leora pushed the fear down, focusing on Isadora, on the regulars, on keeping the diner's heart beating. But at night, in her cramped apartment above the feed store, she'd stare at her mother's old photo, alone laughing in the diner's backyard, marigolds in her hair, and wonder how much longer she could hold on. One evening, as the diner was closing, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly, Declan approached Leora, his expression serious. Isadora was asleep in a booth, her head resting on her sketchbook, a half-finished drawing of a pancake, with crown peeking out. The diner was empty except for Jackson, who was scrubbing the grill in the kitchen, his grumbling audible through the pass-through window. "I need to talk to you," Declan said, his voice low, almost urgent. Leora wiped down the counter, bracing herself. "What's up?" "I want you to work for me," Declan said, his words deliberate, "as Isadora's caregiver. Full-time. Name your price." Leora froze, her rag still in hand. "You're joking." "I'm not. You've done more for her in months than anyone else has in years. I'll pay you whatever you want, move you to Seattle, cover your expenses. Anything. $2 million a year, if that's what it takes." Leora's mind spun. $2 million could erase her mother's medical debt, save Dawn's Haven, pay for the counseling degree she dreamed of. She could finally breathe, but something felt wrong, like a transaction that would cheapen what she'd built with Isadora. "Money doesn't fix people," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Isadora doesn't need a hired nanny. She needs her dad." Declan flinched, his hands clenching. "I'm trying," he said, his voice raw, "but I'm failing her. I can't do this alone." Leora looked at Isadora, her small form curled up in the booth, her face peaceful for the first time in months. "I'll help," she said finally, "but on my terms. No Seattle, no fancy houses. Isadora stays here, where she's happy. And you show up, really show up." Declan nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Deal." But as he left, Leora felt a chill. She knew Declan's world, money, power, control, wasn't so easily left behind, and she wondered if she just stepped into something bigger than she could handle. Months passed, and Isadora's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Her cheeks grew rosy, her eyes bright with life. She helped Leora in the kitchen, giggling as flour dusted her nose while they baked cookies for the regulars. She painted pictures for the diner's walls, turning the drab space into a gallery of color, pancakes with wings, stars, and rainbows. She learned to ride a bike in the parking lot, wobbling at first, but beaming when Leora and Torin cheered her on. The diner became her sanctuary, a place where she could be a kid again. Leora became Isadora's anchor, teaching her how to braid her hair, plant marigolds in the diner's tiny backyard, and laugh without fear. But she also pushed Declan to step up. He started joining them for meals, leaving his phone in the car. He read Isadora bedtime stories, his voice halting at first, but growing steadier. One night, when Isadora fell asleep on his shoulder, Leora saw tears in his eyes, and she knew he was trying. Declan's own transformation was slower, more fraught. He began to see the diner not as a pit stop, but as a community. He fixed a leaky faucet, earning a grudging nod from Jackson. He listened to Thane's stories about Ashwood Hollow's history, asking questions that surprised even the old man. He even joined Torin for a game of checkers one slow afternoon, losing spectacularly but laughing for the first time Leora had ever heard. But she saw the tension in him, The way his phone still buzzed with urgent emails, the way his jaw tightened when he thought about his other life. Meanwhile, the diner's troubles deepened. Gideon sent a letter threatening eviction if the rent wasn't paid by spring. Leora worked extra shifts, cut corners, even sold her mother's old necklace, a silver chain with a marigold pendant, to keep the lights on. She didn't tell anyone, not even Jackson, but Torin noticed her quieter moments, the way her smile didn't always reach her eyes. "You're carrying too much, Leora," he said one day, slipping an extra 10 into the tip jar. She waved it off, but the weight pressed harder. One afternoon, as Leora and Isadora were decorating cupcakes with rainbow sprinkles, Declan pulled Leora aside, his face grave. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low, "about Serafina." Leora's heart sank. She'd heard enough to know Serafina's death was a wound that hadn't healed. "You don't have to." "I do," he said, his eyes burning with pain. "She was everything to us. The accident, it was my fault. I was on a call, distracted. I didn't see the truck." His voice broke, and he looked away. Isadora was in the car. "She saw it all. She blames me, Leora. I know she does." Leora's breath caught. She imagined Isadora, trapped in that moment, watching her world shatter. She reached out, touching Declan's arm. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "And Isadora doesn't blame you. She's just lost. You're her dad. You can help her find her way back." Declan shook his head, but for the first time, he didn't pull away. And in that moment, Leora felt a shift, not just in him, but in herself. She was no longer just the waitress. She was someone who could heal, who could build, who could fight for those she loved. One rainy Thursday, the diner was alive with the hum of the evening rush. Leora was serving a table of farmers when Declan walked in, his face pale, his suit rumpled, his eyes wild with something she couldn't place. Isadora ran to hug him, but he barely responded, his gaze distant. "Leora," he said, pulling her into the kitchen, away from the dining room's chatter. "I sold my company. $3 billion. It's done." Leora's stomach dropped. "What? Why?" "Because of Isadora. Because of you." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice trembling with intensity. "I've spent my life chasing money, thinking it would fix everything. But it didn't save Serafina. It didn't save Isadora. You did. This place did." Leora stared at him, her mind racing. "What are you saying?" "I'm starting a foundation," he said, his words tumbling out. "For kids like Isadora. Kids who've lost someone, who are struggling with grief. I want you to run it. You're the heart of this, Leora. You're the one who showed me what matters." Leora's breath caught. Run a foundation? Her, a waitress with no degree, no experience, no pedigree? "I'm not qualified," she protested, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to." "You're more qualified than anyone," Declan interrupted, stepping closer, his eyes fierce. "You see people. You care. That's what kids need. Not money, not systems. People like you." The kitchen door swung open, and Isadora poked her head in, her face bright. "Leora, are you coming? We're going to make a new pancake face. A superhero one." Leora looked at Isadora, then at Declan, the weight of his offer pressed against her chest. This wasn't just about Isadora anymore. This was about thousands of kids, about a chance to make a difference on a scale she'd never imagined. But it also meant leaving Dawn's Haven, her home, her mother's legacy. And what about Declan? The way he looked at her now, with something deeper than gratitude, stirred feelings she wasn't ready to name. "Give me time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think." That night, Leora sat in her apartment, staring at a Lowen's photo. She thought about the years she'd spent in Ashwood Hollow, the dreams she'd buried, the promises she'd made to her mother. She thought about Isadora's smile, Declan's tears, the way Dawn's Haven had become a haven. And she thought about Serafina, a woman she'd never met but whose absence shaped every moment. But the next morning, a new storm arrived. Gideon showed up at the diner, his face smug, a legal notice in hand. "You're 4 months behind," he said, slapping the paper on the counter. "Pay up by next week, or Dawn's Haven is mine. I've got developers ready to turn this dump into condos. Leora's heart sank. Dawn's Haven wasn't just a building. It was Alohan's legacy, Isadora's sanctuary, the heart of Ashwood Hollow. She couldn't let it go. But how could she save it and take on Declan's foundation? The two dreams felt like opposing forces, tearing her apart. Leora didn't tell Declan about the eviction notice. She couldn't bear to burden him when he was finally finding his way with Isadora. Instead, she confided in Jackson, who slammed his spatula down and said, "This place is family. We fight for it." Word spread through the diner like wildfire. Torin overheard and promised to spread the word at the truck stop. Thane rallied the seniors at the community center, their eyes glinting with determination. Even Isadora, sensing something was wrong, drew a picture of Dawn's Haven with a giant heart around it, saying, "This is home." By Friday, the town had a plan, a fundraiser to save Dawn's Haven. Live music, food, a silent auction, all in the diner's parking lot. Leora was overwhelmed, her throat tight as she watched Ashwood Hollow come alive. Torin donated his old guitar for the auction. Thane offered his collection of vintage baseball cards. Jackson cooked vats of chili, muttering about kicking Gideon's greedy butt. Isadora painted signs with rainbows and pancakes, her enthusiasm infectious. Declan showed up unasked with a checkbook in hand. "Let me pay the rent," he said, his voice firm. "I can fix this." Leora shook her head, her eyes fierce. "This isn't about money. It's about us. The town. You're part of it now, but you don't get to swoop in and save the day. Help us fight for it." Declan stared at her, then nodded, a slow smile breaking through. "All right, Leora Vance. What's the plan?" The fundraiser was a blur of music, laughter, and hope. The local band played twangy covers. Kids ran wild with face paint, and the smell of Jackson's chili filled the air. Declan manned the dunk tank, soaked to the skin but laughing as Isadora threw the winning pitch. Leora moved through the crowd, her heart swelling as she saw neighbors, strangers, and regulars pour in donations. By midnight, they'd raised enough to cover 3 months' rent and buy some time. But Gideon wasn't swayed. He showed up the next day, his face cold. "Nice stunt," he said, tossing another notice on the counter. "But the full debt, $75,000, is due by Monday or you're out." Leora's knees buckled, but she stood tall. "You'll get your money," she said, her voice steel. She didn't know how, but she'd find a way. Sunday morning. Leora found herself alone in the diner, the quiet pressing against her. Isadora had left her sketchbook on the counter, open to a new drawing. A picture of Leora, Isadora, and Declan standing together in front of Dawn's Haven, surrounded by stars. A note in Isadora's shaky script read, "My family." Leora's heart ached, but another discovery shook her to her core. While cleaning the storage room, she found a box of Alohan's old papers, tucked behind a stack of flour sacks. Inside was a letter from Alohan, written during her final days, and a faded property deed. The letter read, "Leora, Dawn's Haven is more than a diner. It's our heart. If times get tough, check the deed. There's a secret I never told you. I love you always, Mom." The deed revealed something astonishing. Alohan had owned a small plot of land behind the diner, a patch of scrubby grass no one thought twice about. But a note in Alohan's handwriting mentioned mineral rights, and a geological survey from the 80s hinting at a possible oil deposit. Leora's pulse raced. Could this be the answer to saving Dawn's Haven? She called Torin, who knew a geologist friend from his trucking days. By Sunday evening, the geologist, a grizzled man named Kalen, was poking around the backyard with equipment borrowed from a friend. "It's a long shot," Kalen warned, "but there's something here. Could be worth a fortune or nothing." Leora didn't tell Declan or Isadora. She couldn't raise their hopes until she knew for sure. But the possibility kept her awake, her mind torn between the diner, the foundation, and the growing feeling she had for Declan. Feelings she was terrified to name. Monday morning dawned gray and heavy, the air thick with the promise of rain. Gideon arrived at Dawn's Haven, his lawyer in tow, a smirk on his face. "Time's up, Vance," he said, slapping a final eviction notice on the counter. Pack your things. Leora stood behind the counter, her heart pounding. The diner was quiet, save the hum of the coffee maker and the soft scribble of Isadora's crayon as she drew in a booth. Declan was there too, his eyes locked on Leora, sensing something was wrong. Before Leora could respond, Kalen burst through the door, his face flushed. "Leora, you're sitting on a gold mine," he said, waving a report. "The land out back, it's got oil. Not a gusher, but enough to fetch at least $150,000 from a drilling company. More if you negotiate." The diner erupted in gasps. Torin whooped, Thane clapped, and Jackson poked his head out of the kitchen, a rare grin splitting his face. Gideon's smirk vanished, his face paling. "You're bluffing," he sputtered. Leora held up the deed and Aloan's letter, her voice steady. "This land's mine, Gideon, and so is Dawn's Haven. You'll get your $75,000 by tomorrow, and then you're out of our lives." But Gideon wasn't done. He leaned in, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? I know people. Powerful people. This diner's days are numbered." He stormed out, his lawyer scrambling after him. Leora's heart sank. Gideon's threat lingered like a storm cloud, but she pushed it aside. She had a plan. She'd sell the oil rights to save the diner and fund the foundation startup, ensuring both dreams could coexist. But first, she needed to face Declan. That afternoon, in the diner's backyard, where Isadora was planting marigold with Thane, Leora pulled Declan aside. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. "We do it our way. The foundation starts here, with Dawn's Haven. We save the diner, we help kids, and we do it together." Declan was silent, his eyes searching hers. Then he stepped closer, his voice low. "There's more. I'm moving here. For Isadora. For us. And I've got something else." He pulled a document from his jacket. The deed to Dawn's Haven's building, purchased from Gideon's company that morning. "It's yours. No strings attached. And I've set up a trust to cover the diner's costs forever." Leora's breath hitched. "Why?" "Because this is where Isadora found her smile again," he said, his voice breaking. "Because this is where I found you. And because I love you, Leora Vance." Tears spilled down her cheeks. But before she could speak, a new figure appeared at the edge of the backyard. A woman in a sleek black coat, her face sharp and calculating. "Declan Warwick," she said, her voice cold. "You're making a mistake." Declan tensed. "Vanessa," he said, his voice low. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa Creed, a former board member at War Technologies, stepped forward, her eyes glinting. "You sold the company without consulting me. You think you can walk away from that world? There are people who won't let you, people who know your secrets." Leora's heart raced. Secrets? What was Vanessa talking about? Declan's face darkened, but he stood his ground. "I'm done with that life. Vanessa, whatever you're planning, it won't change my mind." Vanessa smirked, tossing a folder onto the ground. "We'll see." She turned and vanished into the dusk, leaving Leora and Declan staring at the folder, its contents a mystery. That evening, Leora and Declan sat in the diner after closing, the folder open between them. Inside were documents, emails, financial records, and a grainy photo of Declan with a man Leora didn't recognize, dated a year before Seraphina's death. The implication was clear. Vanessa was suggesting Declan had been involved in something shady, a deal that could ruin him. "It's not what it looks like," Declan said, his voice low. "The man in the photo was a competitor. We were negotiating a deal, but it fell through. Vanessa's trying to scare me into returning to Seattle. She wants control of the Foundation's funds." Leora's mind raced. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to drag you into my mess," he said, his eyes pained. "I thought I could leave it behind." Leora took his hand, her voice steady. "No more secrets. We face this together." The next day, Leora met with a lawyer friend of Torin's, who reviewed the documents and confirmed they were circumstantial at best. "Vanessa's got nothing solid," he said, "but she's dangerous. Watch your back." Leora and Declan devised a plan. They'd go public with the Foundation's launch, announcing it at the diner with the town's support, making it clear Declan was committed to Ashwood Hollow. Vanessa's threats would lose power in the face of transparency and community backing. Leora also secured a deal with a drilling company for $200,000, enough to pay off Gideon and fund the foundation's first year. The foundation's launch was held in Dawn's Haven's parking lot, transformed into a festival of hope. Lanterns glowed, a local band played, and kids painted murals on wooden panels. Isadora's latest drawing, a pancake with a halo of stars, Seraphina's smile shining through, hung above the diner's entrance, a beacon of love. Leora stood before the crowd, her voice steady as she announced the Seraphina Warwick Foundation, dedicated to helping kids heal from grief. Declan stood beside her, his hand in hers, his eyes shining with pride. Gideon was there, his face sour but silent, his plans thwarted. Vanessa didn't show, her threats fading in the face of the town's unity. The diner was safe, its deed in Leora's name, its future secured by Declan's trust and the oil money. As the crowd cheered, Isadora ran to Leora, waving her sketchbook. "Leora, look, I drew a new pancake. For Mommy." The drawing was a radiant pancake with wings and a crown, surrounded by marigolds. Leora knelt, pulling Isadora into her arms. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick. "Your mom's watching, and she's so proud." Declan joined them, his hand resting on Leora's shoulder. "We're a team now," he said, his voice soft but sure. "All of us." Leora looked at him, her heart full. "I love you, too," she whispered, the word she'd held back spilling free. Declan's eyes widened, and he pulled her close, Isadora giggling between them. A year later, Dawn's Haven Diner was more than a diner. It was the heart of the Seraphina Warwick Foundation, a lifeline for kids across Ashwood Hollow and beyond. The backyard had been transformed into a garden where kids planted flowers, painted murals, and laughed without fear, their voices mingling with the hum of Cedar Street. The diner's walls were a gallery of their art, Isadora's star pancake at the center, a beacon of hope. Leora ran the foundation with the same heart she'd always poured into the diner, training counselors, welcoming families, building a program that felt like family, not charity. She'd enrolled in night classes, her counseling dream alive again, her nights filled with textbooks and Declan's quiet encouragement. Dawn's Haven thrived, its neon sign glowing brighter now, its booths filled with new faces and old regulars. Jackson still grumbled, but he'd started teaching Isadora how to flip pancakes, his gruff voice softening when she giggled. Torin and Thane became unofficial grandpas, their stories a nightly ritual. Declan, now a resident of Ashwood Hollow, traded his suits for jeans, his boardroom for the diner's counter, his phone often forgotten as he helped Isadora with homework or brainstormed with Leora on new ways to grow the foundation. Leora's transformation was the quietest but the deepest. She'd found her purpose, her family, her home. She and Declan were building a love rooted in trust, their evenings spent in the diner's garden, Isadora playing nearby, the marigolds swaying in the breeze. One evening, as the diner closed, Isadora handed Leora a necklace with a tiny pancake pendant, a nod to Mr. Starbread. "This is for you," she said, her eyes bright, "so you always know you're our home." Leora's heart cracked open, tears spilling down. "I love you, kiddo," she whispered, pulling Isadora close. Declan wrapped his arms around them both, his voice a quiet strength. "We're family now," he said, his voice thick. "Forever." The next morning, Leora stood outside Dawn's Haven, the sun rising over Ashwood Hollow, painting the sky in gold and pink. The neon sign hummed, steady and strong, its glow a promise. She thought of Aloan, of Seraphina, of the kids who'd find hope within these walls. She thought of Isadora's laughter, Declan's love, the town that had fought for her, and she smiled, knowing this was only the beginning.